The winding forest trail stretched before me as I hiked deeper into the northern woods, seeking solace from the turmoil of my former life. Out here, distanced from the demands of my career and the clamor of the city, I hoped to center myself again amidst the majestic old-growth trees. I had always found clarity in the forests. As I walked, the ancient sentinels of the woods stood tall around me, the wise oaks and towering pines having borne witness to ages. Birdsong echoed in the brisk autumn air, and my boots crunched on the carpet of brittle leaves that stretched endlessly ahead. I spotted a clearing nurtured by a babbling stream and knew at once this would be my camp. I soon had my shelter erected beneath the strong limbs of an oak nearly as old as the forest itself. As the sun dipped low, staining the sky amber, I gathered kindling and built up a crackling fire. The flames danced, holding the creeping night at bay. Settling on a log, I took a deep breath, the faint wood smoke-scented air revitalizing. For the first time in years I felt at peace, far from the demands that had worn me down. I had come home. Here I would find myself again. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees, stirring me from dreams still tinged with the peace of the wild woods. I emerged from my tent, taking in lungfuls of crisp air scented with birch and pine. Nearby, a raven called, its rasping voice echoing as if beckoning me to follow. I felt an urge to wander the forest, imagination sparked with what wonders the shadowed depths might hold. As my boots brushed through carpets of leaves and fern, each step took me deeper, to where only timid shafts of light penetrated. The woods here felt untouched, primeval, and a hush fell under branches knitted tightly overhead. In a sun-dappled clearing, I caught a flash of stonework tangled in moss and brush. Pushing aside the veil of foliage, an ancient structure emerged, a small, crumbling building no larger than a shed. The remnants of strange symbols adorned the archway entrance. I paused, hearing only the thrum of blood in my ears as curiosity pulled me toward the threshold. Dust swirled in the dim light as I entered, flakes glinting like lost treasures. I swept my flashlight beam over rubble and debris until it landed on something tucked in the far corner, an ancient tome, its leather binding mottled with age yet strangely intact. Kneeling down, I examined the text, symbols seeming to shift and twist as if coming to life. I ran a trembling hand over the surface, compelled to know what secrets had endured within these pages for ages untold. Trembling hands gingerly opened the fragile book, disturbed motes of dust dancing on unseen currents. An irresistible compulsion guided me to decipher the cryptic words etched on yellowed pages. Strange, eldritch syllables tumbled off my tongue, as if invoked from ancestral memory. The air in the crumbling structure grew thick and crackled with unseen energy. Rising to my feet, I gazed around at dust-laden stones now draped in wavering shadows. It was as if they absorbed all sound, and even my breaths felt muffled. An inexplicable dread clawed up my spine, gooseflesh prickling along my arms. The once tranquil forest air now weighed heavy with ominous premonition, sinister watchers seeming to peer from the darkened gaps and recesses. This place, a refuge mere moments ago, suddenly felt steeped in warning. The very air grew taut, as if the trees and stones now listened, bearing witness to the incantation. A rumbling resonated up through the roots below, subtle at first then building as though the earth shuddered in response. Shadows writhed and twisted, weaving sinuous shapes that flitted in my periphery. The symbols burned brighter, etched by fire on the fragile parchment. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, the world plunged into a darkness beyond night. The shadows congealed and surged forward, hungry specters that passed through stone and wood and bone to surround me. Their hollow gazes fixed upon my soul, seeking, judging. A timeless intelligence glared back at me, ancient beyond reckoning. I staggered under the awful revelation of what I had awakened with the fateful words. These were the custodians of arcane secrets, the jailers of threats better left chained outside the circles of this world. And I had set them free with my foolish trespass. From the pooling blackness stepped contorted, twisted shadows. Where eyes should have been were only hollow voids as they surrounded me, silent judges measuring my mortal sum as terror froze blood in my veins. The creatures paused as a guttural groan shook the crumbling shrine. Ancient wards placed long ago were unraveling. Panic spurred me to reckless flight. book still clutched to my chest, I plunged from the shadows of that accursed place. Behind, the unnatural gloom flowed like sentient oil, chased by the shrieking heralds of the grave. All around, the once friendly trees reached out with needled claws as if to bar escape. My blood turned to ice as tormented shrieks erupted around me, the haunting sound reverberating eerily through the ancient forest. The tortured cries cascaded one upon another, echoing through the close-set trees as though the wood itself was screaming out in anguish. From the creeping shadows, dark forms materialized, featureless specters swirling with primordial menace, trailing wisps of umbral mist. Their hollow gazes fixed upon me, chilling accusations simmering in those empty sockets. They moved in a convulsive dance, advancing and retreating, as if weaving unseen threads around my paralyzed form. I crashed through low-hanging boughs that clawed my arms and face, drawing blood. The forest, once a sanctuary, now seemed alive with ill intent. Branches as ancient as fossilized bones stretched toward me from all sides, creaking and groaning as they obscured paths worn familiar over the years. A rising panic choked my breath as the entities, with unnatural speed, gave relentless pursuit. They flowed between warped trees and over land and stone, no earthly form hindering their phantasmal bodies. Through the dense foliage, they herded me like prey, their keening wails piercing the gloom on all sides as they drove me ever deeper into shadow recesses. The ancient trees seemed to bend and creak, bowing inward and obscuring any familiar sign or landmark. Their weighted silence amplified the screaming tension in the air. Exhaustion seeped into my limbs even as my heart raced like a trapped hare. Still I staggered on, stumbling over roots that curled like bony fingers, clawing at my feet as if yearning to hold me pinned for those shrieking wraiths. When at last I beheld a break in the trees, I stumbled into filtered daylight, yet it revealed only a sheer-sided gorge with a dark river churning far below. I teetered at the brink, glanced darting desperately for an escape route. But the heralds were upon me, their smoky forms blotting out the light. They glided forward with arms outstretched, the chill of their spectral being washing over me in waves. I shrank back only to feel empty space yawning at my heels. The ancient book tumbled from my numb fingers as realization sank in. I was merely a pawn caught in some arcane contest between powers beyond my comprehension. What hubris made me think I could meddle with such eldritch forces and not face reprisal? As the swirling wraiths approached for the final stroke, I closed my eyes, praying for deliverance from this nightmare of my own making. Teetering at the precipice, I stole a glance back at the ancient tome lying in the dirt and leaves. The book's weathered binding and cryptic pages, which had been a source of such wonder and terror, now seemed to hold the key to unlocking this nightmare made manifest. As the swirling entities closed in, their wispy forms almost tangible in the fading light, I spotted a narrow deer path snaking its way precariously down the gorge wall. Hope flickered in my chest. Could I reach it before those shades descended upon me? I tore my gaze from the book, its forbidden knowledge having already extracted too high a price. The shadows around me shifted, warped, the heralds swirling in a frenzy as they sensed my desperation. As one, they lunged with arms outstretched and howls of manic fury in their throats. I threw myself sideways, tumbling painfully down crude natural steps to the deer trail below. Spectral hands grasped only empty air behind me. On hands and knees I scrambled along the trail, blood and bruises ignored in my frantic bid for life. Rolling head over heels to the bottom, I lay dazed and disoriented amid a carpet of brittle pine needles. Faint shafts of dusk light filtered down from the cliff top I had so narrowly escaped. From that precipice echoed the frustrated shrieks of the entities, bereft of their prey. For the moment, their incorporeal forms could not penetrate to these shadow depths. I staggered upright, wincing as adrenaline faded enough to register bruises and scratches from my desperate flight. Leaning against the fungus-flecked boulder, I gulped air that tasted of moist soil and decaying wood. The stillness here felt taut, as though the forest held its breath, warily watching the cosmic drama unfolding. The woods, once a sanctuary, had become a labyrinth of horrors I was ill prepared to reckon with. And somewhere high above lay the mysterious tome, discarded among the snarled roots and creeping shadows. What other secrets, what other primeval creatures slumbered in the furthest reaches? And had my trespass now awakened them to walk the earth once more? I shuddered, the lingering malevolence here leaving me hollow, a shell-shocked witness to forces beyond human comprehension. Perhaps this darkness was merely an emissary heralding far worse still to come. The shadows deepened, and with dread clouding my heart, I stumbled on in search of escape from this elder-haunted wood. Breathing hard, I hunkered in a thicket, thorns and brambles catching at my hair and clothes. Peering up through the gnarled branches at the ledge far above, I shuddered. The ancient tome still lay where I had dropped it in my desperate flight. The book, this had to be because of that accursed relic, I realized. I had trespassed and desecrated a shrine better left undisturbed, unleashing preternatural forces. And for what? To satisfy reckless curiosity? A fine thread of sound drifted down through the gloom, the echoing cries of the entities, still combing the shadowed forest. But night was falling, the vivid bloom of sunset fading to ominous dusk. I had to move despite protesting muscles and bleeding scratches. As full darkness enveloped the ancient woods, I summoned the last dregs of courage to creep from my hiding place, a thicket that had seemed to provide meager shelter but now felt far too exposed. Hoisting my pack, I turned my back on the ravine where I had barely escaped entrapment. Even now, I couldn't shake the haunting feeling that the entity's empty but seeing eyes still bore out from the enshrouding shadows. With utmost care I picked my way over roots and stones, wincing at every crackle and snap of twigs under my boots. The woods stood silent, devoid of birdsong or creature stirrings. Even the branches overhead were still, adding to the suffocating hush. It was as if the ancient trees themselves now held vigil, waiting to see what emerged triumphant as I departed their realm, mankind or the elder beings from beyond the stars. The trees themselves took on twisted, almost human shapes as I slunk between their hulking boles, jumping at every creak and groan. The tangled roots underfoot grasped like bony fingers, and overhead, bowed branches reached down as if to snatch the interloper, disturbing their repose. When the beam of my flashlight caught a trail marker, I nearly wept with relief. But I did not trust that the forest would allow my escape so easily. As I traced the familiar path, I strained every sense for pursuit, imagining the shrieking wraiths flowing silent as smoke behind me. At long last, I emerged from that accursed wood to blessed starlight, and my camp still in place. Only then did I dare a glance back, half expecting to see malevolent shapes creeping from the vaulted trees. But there was only stillness and silence. Not slowing my pace, I fled into the night, praying the ancient forest would not stir again until the end of days. Packing my gear with fumbling hands, I constantly glanced over my shoulder, half expecting the featureless specters to materialize out of the encroaching darkness. The full moon overhead cast an eerie silver glow, etching long shadows that seemed to dance and contort in a macabre waltz. Every shape took on ghostly dimensions, and I jumped at the sight of a swaying branch or the scurry of a night creature. Shuddering at the thought, I hoisted my pack and stole from the silent trees toward the trail. Glancing back, I pictured the book sprouting sinister tendrils, sinking deep to rouse elder beings from primordial slumbers. This night I had witnessed only a small measure of the wrath such foolish curiosity could bring. By dawn I meant to put many miles between myself and that would grown suddenly strange. With spectral eyes seeming to follow my every movement, I hurried on beneath the pallid moon, praying the outer world was not already too late to escape the reckoning I had helped unleash. At last, I crept from the close-set trees, the weight and watchful gloom of the night lifting as I stepped into open countryside. Stars wheeled overhead, familiar constellations steadying my rattled mind. But behind me crouched that dark expanse of ancient wood, a looming shadow now tainted by the vivid memory of the entities and the eldritch secrets I had disturbed. I shuddered, knowing those images would likely haunt me to the end of my days. Had that tome lain forgotten for centuries amid the crumbling deadfalls and groaning boughs? What could drive a person to inscribe such warnings and bind such horrors to the printed word? For what unfathomable purpose had that book been crafted? And what of the shrieking jailers I had freed? Would they dissipate with the rising sun, or were those faceless specters even now spreading malice and chaos in the outside world? Perhaps the true depth of my violation would only be known when next that isolated forest saw a human presence. I walked on into the night, eager to leave miles between myself and that place, yet wondering if I could ever truly outpace what now stalked the recesses of my thoughts. By reading aloud words better left unspoken, I had witnessed the thinning veil between reality and more primal planes. What waited on the other side now peered back, knowing our realm at last. That harrowing night would echo through my memory until the end of my days, a reminder of the eldritch unknown that waits beyond the fragile bulwarks of civilization and reason, hungry for trespassers.